Welcome to the City Rooster Podcast. I'm Ken Kasner, and today we start with the phrase, we saw this all coming. We saw everything coming. You don't have to be an expert or a professional or a college professor, even or somebody really, really smart to see this. Just have to be insightful. Me being the age I am now, I do remember that I saw very easier times, better times, but even back in the 80s and the 90s, I was worried about things that could go wrong. Not that I was being a pessimist, but I talked about them with people. And a lot of people turn a blind eye to a lot of things. Conservatives were the guiltiest of that. That was their biggest mistake. Conservatives are very patriotic to this country and love this country, but they thought at that time that we didn't need to try to perform a level of maintenance to keep our country as great as it once was. They turned a blind eye to a lot of things that they thought were never going to happen. So independents like me actually talked about it, but most of the time, outside of those people that agreed with me, and there were not many, there were nobody actually believed. Oh, come on, Ken. Oh, come on, Rooster. That's ridiculous. You're being pessimistic. Oh, why are you always looking at the darker side of things? Oh, come on. This will never happen. That will never happen. Oh, no. Joe Biden will never become president of the United States. He's a horrible man. Why would anybody elect him? Things like that. Yeah, sure, someday we'll have a black president, but he'll be a true American. He's not going to be a socialist like Barack Obama. They just turn, and liberals, some liberals were very bright, but others basically had a lust for change, any change. They didn't care what it was. They didn't care whether it was good or bad. And the progressive movement was perfect for them because they believed that it was going to make their lives better. And progressivism did everything to make our lives worse. And independents like me saw it at that point. And we saw a lot of things. People who were anti-war at the time were anti-war because they felt that, if we get too much involved in other countries' affairs, our country is going to be the target for other schemes from adversarial countries. That's what's going to happen. And, of course, all these things that people like me feared, independents like me feared were going to happen, are happening. Everything you hear about in the news, you see it all the time. We hear about Chinese trying to indoctrinate people to believe that capitalism is not good, when we all know that it's what made this country great. We all see things that people just don't understand now. We have systems that are being used against us by other countries, such as the Chinese. They're trying to have pregnant Chinese women come here to have their kids delivered in this country and then brought back to China so they can grow up with communist ways and then come here and vote. You've heard of all that talk. That's what they're doing now, because a lot of things in the Constitution are now being misconstrued or redefined as something that they really aren't. And it's very hard to fight now. We're lucky to have a guy like Donald Trump who has the tenacity to awaken people to all this. Now, good or bad, and he has his faults and mistakes and strong points like everybody else, but his tenacity, which you will very rarely see, is what kept it in. If there was one thing, if somebody asked me one thing I would remember about Donald Trump, what's the first thing you would remember about Donald Trump? Me, the city rooster, I would say he's tenacious. He has tenacity. He has guts. He has balls. Okay? He stayed there. He's giving up his golden years to try to see if he can help this country. At one point, he displayed signs that he wasn't sure if he was going to do that. He could be down in Florida, in Mar-a-Lago, swinging a few golf balls here and there, being with children and grandchildren. He has a family that is very into business and are doing good things. And he's not with them. He's in the White House now. And he has targets on his back. They almost killed him. He really put his life on the line for something he didn't have to. He had a lot of money. He went through business. He knew better, but he did it because he knows that a lot of other people don't know better. And now because the trust is being burnt, there are people he doesn't trust now. Some podcasters he's criticizing. We don't like all these podcasters fighting each other and arguing with each other, but we knew it was going to happen. We knew it was going to happen, and the reason why these podcasters, right or wrong, are disputing each other is because now we have some difficult problems that could have been easily avoided if everybody just stopped being so radical, stopped being so progressive, stopped believing that the progressive movement was going to be something that was going to help us. It never was. Women and blacks and all sorts of other people who had to get the right to vote in the 20th century would have gotten the right to vote anyway with their protests in March. They would have gotten it anyway because they're Americans and it's constitutional for Americans to vote. The progressive movement didn't do as much for them as they may have believed. The progressive movement did nothing, but it just masks all the so-called improvements, and it masks all the terrible things that are being done now. We have bad relationships with many countries because of this. We should have never had. Never had NATO. NATO should have never existed. NATO didn't bring down Russia. Russia was going to burn itself out anyway when it came to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was not going to last. It was not as powerful as the CCP. We didn't need NATO for anything. We didn't need to be the world's policeman. World War II made people think that we're the world's policeman. We were fooled by that. We were never the world's policeman. We were the world's sucker. We shouldn't be sending all this money overseas to all these different countries. We shouldn't be sending out all these programs. We shouldn't be even having nonprofits. But we do that. We give all this money away, and people can abuse it and send it wherever they want and not be accountable for it. And now we're in a situation where we're becoming a criminal entity. The only people that get in trouble are law-abiding citizens. Criminals, they get off. They can kill people. Nobody's going to catch them. And if they do, some radical judge with idiocy is going to let them go. We saw this coming. We knew this was going to come. Now, I've been around, I'll admit, I'm in my 60s. But 40 years ago, people didn't see this. This was not as apparent as it is now. It was not as conspicuous as it is now. The reason why it's conspicuous is so much because Donald Trump, who's being so villainized, opened people's eyes. If it weren't for Donald Trump, a lot of these people wouldn't even see any of this going on. Everything that Nick Shirley has exposed as far as embezzlement of money, as far as fake agencies, that's been around for a long time before Nick Shirley was even born. There were agencies that were taking money from the government for doing nothing that they advertised. That's been going on for decades because people thought that nothing was going to come of it, that it was never going to hurt the country. That's what they believed. They really believed that. Of course, we all knew that that wasn't true. We were going to pay the price for it. It's like they say, socialism is living off of other people's money. Well, people were being socialist then, but they didn't describe it as socialist. They described it as being fortunate. And it wasn't being fortunate. They were just living off of other people's money, and you run out of other people's money. And that's what's happening here. Now, many people, and I have a little sinking feeling into myself, I'd like to believe otherwise, that a miracle will be created to turn this country around. If that miracle doesn't come, then by 2100, the United States will no longer be a constitutional republic. Okay? We're lucky that we speak English. We should have stuck with that fixed language. It was supposed to be the official language. Now, there were things even our framers, I'll use the word framers instead of founding fathers. I'll say framers. People like George Washington, people like Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, all these people were against political parties. They were against political parties because then what you have are groups of people who campaign against people who are trying to do the right thing. You have lobbyists. You have special interest groups. You have NGOs, non-government organizations. But if you didn't have political parties, you wouldn't have NGOs. You wouldn't have lobbyists. You wouldn't have special interest groups. Even having a disability. As a person with a disability myself, I'm legally blind. Things were a lot better before 1990. I was young and stupid then. I thought that maybe getting in on the Americans with Disabilities Act and fighting for it would make our lives better. It made our lives worse. Why? Because the Americans with Disabilities Act was a government-organized movement. And the government is used to interpret the Americans with Disabilities Act. And early on, even before that, I was criticized because people were starting to see what it was doing, even before I started to see the damage it was doing, and said things to me like, Kenny, the Americans with Disabilities Act is not constitutional, much like Roe versus Wade. People who fought for Roe versus Wade, which made abortion legal, it was not constitutional, but people who fought for it, they didn't know any better either. That's why nowadays people say we can't trust the American government. Not anymore. Maybe there was a time we could. There was a lot of times when people thought that we could actually do all these things, but it only looked good at the surface. We should have left our country alone, let people thrive, because there were going to be improvements in minority groups. People were getting opportunities. People are being accused of racism. Well, racism hadn't been used for over 100 years. Look at all the people that have opportunities that are still saying there's racism going on. I myself, when I was in school, I was around blacks, whites, whichever. I always thought of skin color as like hair color or eye color. I always saw the boys. I was one of the boys. If he had different skin color than me, he was one of the boys. And then you see the girls. And if any of them had different skin color, they were one of the girls. It's as simple as that. And I grew up to be one of the guys. And they grew up to be one of the women. There's a bigger difference between men and women than there is blacks and whites. And a lot of people who came here from those communist countries saw all these wonderful things. But now we have people coming from third world countries that are about to try to take that away. They want to make our country into the same type of shithole as the country that they came from. Their country is a shithole because the people made it that way. You don't see any Benjamin Franklins or Alexander Hamiltons or George Washingtons or any people like that in Somalia. You don't see them in Iran. And these people voted for them. Then the reason why we have a bunch of kooks in Congress today is because before the election system got rigged the way it is, people voted for them. People voted for them because they decided, well, it didn't matter who I vote for. I'll just vote for somebody. It doesn't matter who you vote for. Just vote. Vote for anybody. It doesn't matter how stupid or how smart they are. Just vote for them. Vote for the sake of voting. I'm 18. I'm going to go out and vote for the first time. It doesn't matter who I vote for. There's no integrity meant to voting. That's their thought. Well, of course, we find out now that there is. And then there's people that have the excuses that they don't get involved. Well, that's why our country is the way it is, because a lot of people don't want to get involved. They want to use the excuse, oh, I don't get involved in politics. And to make sure that they don't get involved, they're going to use that cliche, I don't get involved with politics, just to avoid responsibility, even if you bring something up that has nothing to do with politics. The American flag is being altered in many ways. I've seen many versions of what people think is the American flag that isn't. The American flag is supposed to be 13 stripes and 13 red stripes, 13 white stripes, and 50 stars, each representing a state. That's what it's supposed to be. Maybe I didn't describe it in depth or fully accurately, but now they're changing the colors. Now they're even adding things onto the American flag. Originally, the American flag on a lamppost is supposed to be above any other flag. If McDonald's has a lamppost, the American flag is always above the McDonald's flag. So the American flag is on top to signify that this is our country comes first. It's the same with printing out the American flag. You don't print the American flag under something, you print it over something. It gets put on top of something. You don't print something on top of the American flag. You're not supposed to change the American flag. You're not supposed to have logos of Native Americans on top of the American flag. You're not supposed to have smile faces on top of the American flag. You're not supposed to have pictures of the Nazi logo on top of the American flag. But people do this, and the reason why is they're trying to send a message that isn't true. There's many people printing faces of Native Americans on top of the American flag. That's their way of saying it's stolen land, and then they'll have the nerve to go out there and pretend that they're a true American. We have a lot of fake patriots out there now, pretending that they really love this country, and they're doing everything to show how much they hate it by trying to destroy it. Why don't we just bring the country back to what it was before progressivism really took effect? It's been around since the Woodrow Wilson era, and it took 60 years to take noticeable effect. Now it's doing a lot of damage. People who want to be able, who say go woke, go broke, they like that. And they're saying, yay, this company's going out of business. They're so woke anyway. Well, people don't think about the fact that all these companies that went woke were American companies. And they were already ruined when they went woke. That's what adversarial countries do. They try to spread this propaganda and all this distractive material and content to make them change the type of company they were. Lots of companies are like that now. And we can say, yay, they're going out of business. Yay, they're gone. But if they're gone, Another American company's gone, and it's not such a thing to brag about. It's not a victory. It's another loss for America because we had a lot of great companies. If the NFL were to go under, it wouldn't go under because it's too big. It wouldn't be broken up. It would just go to another country. Woke is anti-American. And when a country becomes anti-American, that means it's been affected by another country. We have businesses that actually set up shop in China. Law firms. They were American companies, and they became prestigious law firms. And then they set up a couple of branches in Shanghai and Beijing. That's how the Chinese have the best access to stealing American intellect content. American intellectual property was stolen, and the best way the Chinese had access to it was by having American companies having offices over in China. And they open up offices there, and these people think that they're living a free life. They're not, because there's only one landlord in China, the Chinese Communist Party. And because they have access to these companies, because they open up offices in China, they have access to American intellectual property through these companies. So it's not just the hacking. People need to stay out of China. We need to stay away. We need to stay out of North Korea. We need to stay out of any communist or socialist country that is an adversary of the U.S. We shouldn't even trust them. We shouldn't even make a deal. I've heard Donald Trump, and I like Donald Trump. He's trying to do a lot of good things, but there are some things he's not wise to yet. He thinks that if he makes a deal with Xi Jinping or any Chinese official, that he's going to make them better. No, he's giving them a chance to make us worse. We need to stay out of China. We need to stay away from people we don't trust. We can't trust Iran. We can't trust China. We need to focus on American needs. Nothing against the Jews. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm against this war because I was hoping we wouldn't get into another war. Now, it made sense at the beginning when Trump said, okay, we got to stop World War III. We got to stop these nukes. We got to disable Iran. Personally, I think we already have. But people are going to try to keep us in this war. Now, I never thought I'd see the day where Jews would be accusing other people of being anti-Semitic, and they're not. Saying that you don't want to have wars or get into other countries' affairs is not being anti-Semitic. So I would agree with Megyn Kelly or Tucker Carlson. Not so much Alex Jones, because Alex Jones, I don't find him very credible. Okay, he's lied a lot of times, that sort of thing. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying you don't want to get into another war. It's very simple. Okay, Trump did what he did with Iran because he was trying to protect us. Now it's time to get out of Iran. We should get out of there at least before the World Cup comes here or something like that. People are going to vote by party. They're not going to vote by candidate. So if they say we're going to vote for the Democratic Party, they're not going to choose the right people. And if they say we're going to vote for the Republican Party, they're not going to choose the right people. So this problem is going to keep going on. That's because you even find in the Republican Party, there are not always the right people. We have different leadership than we did 40 years ago. We don't have that kind of leadership now. We have to stop voting by party. We have to vote by the candidate. We have to do research on the people who are taking leadership in our country. Whenever you have a company, the company likes to find out what makes the person qualified for the position they're trying for. Well, wouldn't it be the same here? If people control the country and people vote for it, then maybe we should choose our candidates very carefully. People voted for Donald Trump to be president because they researched him, because they found out what they did, and he's displayed a bunch of experience. But he's not getting a lot of cooperation. And the reason why he's not getting a lot of cooperation is because of all the kooks in Congress. Many of his presidential orders, his executive orders, should be passed into law. But they're not, because of the kooks that people put into Congress, that they don't even know who they're voting for. They never knew who they were voting for. They just voted by party. Stop voting by party. Vote for the candidate of your choice. Now, I'm in New Jersey. I wanted Jack Ciattarelli to be the governor. Why? Not because of the party he was in, but because I listened to him talk, and I listened to the things he was going to do, and I looked at his history, and I saw he was a businessman. And I thought, this would be a great guy to get New Jersey back to the way it was 20 years ago. Just the system. You don't have to revert your taste in music or movies or that sort of thing. Of course, now we've lost music and movies. We don't have any more entertainment. Because now, a lot of the movies out there are garbage. They're crap. They're shit. They mean nothing. A lot of the artists out there are now, the best artists are now becoming regional artists. You don't have too many more arena rock now. You don't have a lot of that going on. Gene Simmons was right. Shut up and play. But they don't do that anymore. Bruce Springsteen, who was a classical musician, classical rock musician, should I say, came out with a lot of good stuff. That was 20 years ago. It's not because he's a radical. It's just because his music now, he doesn't even play anymore. He's trying to turn himself into an advocate. An advocate for what? For the wrong side? Same with Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg was a tremendous actress. I remember her in Jumping Jack Flash. Jumping Jack Flash was a poorly written movie. It was the cast that made it happen. And Whoopi Goldberg was right in the middle of that. She's a great actress. She was in Ghost. A lot of the journalism goes one way. You could say they're leftist journalists, or you could say that for the Democratic Party. You could say anything you want. But the thing about it is, that's not what freedom of the press was created for. It wasn't created for journalists to try to sway people's opinion by telling lies. I always tell people, don't follow local news. Local news is bullshit. The majority of it is lies. The only thing you can find out from the local news is that something happened. The details of it, you really don't know. But people still listen to local news. My older brother follows local news, and he's always wrong. And he's always wrong. I'm talking to a guy who, when growing up, I used to look up to. I thought my older brother was a really, really great guy, and really he was a great brother. But now I've lost him because of the local news. And if he wants to find out if something's true, where does he go? He looks on Google. Why Google? You have 40 other search engines worldwide out there. Google monopolizes them because everybody uses it. It's convenient. It's easy. Okay, fine. But Google's not going to tell you everything you want. Google's going to tell you everything they want you to know. And people have a difficult time facing reality as a result of it. Now, we hear news stations try to flatter them up by saying, oh, Americans are not stupid. Americans will do this. Americans do that. Well, it turns out that they were wrong. I don't want to badmouth my fellow Americans, but collectively as a country, we are not very bright. We've been outsmarted. We've been outsmarted in many ways. You don't have a Victor Davis Hanson on every corner. You don't have a Tucker Carlson on every corner. You don't have people are becoming radicals. People are actually starting to yearn more to their original home countries. No longer are they Americans. They're not Americans anymore. They're worried about being Israeli. They're worried about being British. They're worried about being Egyptian. But they're not worried about being an American anymore, even though America did give them a pretty good life because of the capitalism. So as a result, now people are going against the country and then complaining that the country is no longer a good country. Then they go and they say it's racist. When I was working, I didn't have any of that, and I didn't do any of that. I worked, and basically, I loved people. I still do. But people don't love me. And the reason why is because of what they see in me. They look at me as some old, useless, socialist white guy. That's all they see. That's not because of anything I did. That's because of DEI. DEI makes people be portrayed for things that they don't even know about. They don't even know about those people. You don't get to learn about somebody through DEI. DEI will never tell you about anybody. They won't give you accurate information. It's always wrong. DEI was originally made to try to simply bypass the labor laws. And that's what it's done. But unfortunately, it's also infected the minds of people who have to make decisions about certain criminals, about certain eligibilities. DEI has often been said to be affirmative action on steroids. Well, now, this is what's become of it. We have to try to reverse all this damage. Some of it may be permanent. It was a lot of damage that was permanent. People's lives were killed. We have a lot of Americans that are getting killed, black and white, mind you. Bill Cosby was thrown in jail just because of accusations. A lot of people feel that Bill Cosby was innocent all along, and not because he's black, but because he was wealthy and they wanted his money. And the people who sued him didn't get as much money as they hoped. One Temple student, because he went to Temple, got him thrown in jail. Hardly got any money at all, but got him thrown in jail. Now, his legacy is tarnished because of all these allegations. That's what's happening to a lot of people. I actually did a segment called Too Many Lawyers to show how many stupid lawyers have ruined this country, to help to ruin this country because of all these lawsuits. That's not what the Constitution was for. It was not for this at all. Thank you for coming to the City Rooster Forum. Like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And make sure to comment when you get a chance. I welcome comments. I'll even read some of them on the air.